Let's face it, scoring in the 160s is a solid achievement, and most LSAT students would be happy with that. But maybe you're not most people. Maybe you've got bigger goals, a top-tier law school, a full-ride scholarship, or a life-changing admission that sets you up for a successful legal career. If that sounds like you, then sticking around the mid-160s just isn't going to cut it. Reaching the 170s or even a perfect 180 is a whole different ballgame. Now here's the truth. The strategies you use to get to 160 aren't the same ones that will take you beyond that plateau. At the highest levels, the LSAT stops rewarding formulaic approaches and punishes them instead. Breaking through that score ceiling requires a different mindset and a different set of tactics. Today, I'm going to show you the LSAT prep strategy nobody talks about, the one that takes you from pretty good to elite. First, for those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my own LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, most commercial LSAT prep courses and textbooks are fine for introducing the basics. They show you how to solve the easy questions, maybe the medium ones. They teach you the more common patterns, common flaws, and reading strategies that make complex passages more manageable. And that's great. Those techniques can get you from the 140s into the 150s, maybe a 160. They might even push you to a 165 on a good day. But here's the problem. At the upper levels of the LSAT, the hardest questions, these one-size-fits-all methods stop delivering results. Why? Because the hardest LSAT questions are not designed to be cracked by simple templates. They're designed to test your adaptability and your willingness to reason on the test maker's terms. Once you're competing in the 170-plus arena, you're dealing with subtleties, ambiguities, nuances, and traps that are so well laid, they often feel like the correct answer barely deserves that title. So if you're stuck in the 160s, it's not because you're lazy, it's not because you lack intelligence, it's because you're still playing by the basic rulebook. At the higher levels, you need to start reading between the lines, both in the questions and in your own thought process. And so, at LSAT Unplugged, we offer you a different approach. Not just about learning new techniques or tricks, a more comprehensive mental framework designed to help you think like the test makers and respond fluidly to challenges. We incorporate the Socratic review method, adaptive thinking, and strategic flexibility. These three pillars reinforce each other, and if you implement them consistently, you'll see your performance transform. Let's get into each one. The first pillar, and in many ways the foundation of everything else, is the Socratic review method. If you're serious about getting from a 160 to a 175 or beyond, the standard approach to reviewing mistakes simply won't cut it. Now you might be thinking to yourself, what is the Socratic review method? Here's the basic framework. Instead of passively reading explanations, you highlight what made you choose that tempting wrong answer in the first place. Then you question your reasoning line by line. The idea is to guide yourself through a dialogue, a conversation in which you ask probing questions of your own thought process, just like Socrates would. Here's how it works step by step. First, you ID the error. After you finish a timed section or a full exam, you go straight to the questions you missed or struggled with, and you don't just look at the right answer. Before you look at the explanations, you try to articulate in your own words why you might have been misled. Was it an unfamiliar term, a subtle shift in the argument's direction, or maybe a missing link between premise and conclusion? Second, you want to ask yourself the question why repeatedly. For each misunderstanding, ask yourself why, like you're a 5-year-old, determined to understand how something works. Why did you think the wrong answer was correct at first glance? Why didn't you give more attention to the right answer? You keep digging until you unearth the root cause. Maybe you were too quick to trust a certain keyword, or maybe you got tunnel vision on a particular concept. Then you compare the answers in detail. You don't just accept that the right answer is right. You've got to explain to yourself as if you were teaching another student or explaining it back to your LSAT coach. You want to think, why is it right relative to each wrong answer? Force yourself to articulate the difference in their logic. This process trains your mind to spot subtleties faster next time. And finally, you formulate a takeaway. After each Socratic dialogue with yourself, using the Socratic review method, come away with a specific lesson. It could be a pattern you now recognize or a personal tendency that you need to correct. Now, the Socratic review method is not just about understanding a single question. It's about permanently sharpening your analytical tools. Over time, your brain starts automatically seeing patterns and traps that you would have missed before. By interrogating your mistakes and even your successes, you're rewiring your cognitive approach to the test. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking to yourself, this sounds great, but I couldn't do this alone. I need some personalized guidance. I've got you covered. At LSAT Unplugged, we take all the strategies I'm sharing here and tailor them for you specifically. We create for you a customized study plan, dissect your weaknesses, and refine your strengths. Whether you're stuck at a 160 or you're aiming for a perfect 180, this is your shortcut to measurable progress. You could check out the links below to find out more and work together to make your LSAT goal of 170 plus a reality. Now that you're reviewing your work rigorously, let's talk about the second pillar, adaptive thinking. To score above a 170 on the LSAT, you've got to internalize that it's not always fair the way we'd like. The right answer might feel like a stretch. The reasoning might not feel airtight. But here's the thing. The LSAT is consistent in its own way. It chooses the best answer out of 5, even if that best answer doesn't feel perfect. Your job is to adapt to their logic. First, you've got to embrace imperfection. At the highest levels, you're not really looking for the perfect choice. You're looking for the least flawed or most defensible answer in the context of how the LSAT's authors think. If you find yourself stuck between two, you've got to ask yourself which one aligns more closely with the given evidence, even if it's not the idealized version you had in your head. Now, after you've done this for a while, you'll start seeing patterns in wrong answers. Maybe they consistently shift a key term slightly or introduce a subtle assumption that isn't supported. Adaptive thinking means you recognize these recurring moves and anticipate them. On the harder logical reasoning questions, try mentally plugging each answer back into the argument. Ask yourself, does this help? Does it hurt? Does it change nothing at all? If you're adaptive, you know how to mentally test an answer's impact on the argument's logic quickly and effectively. Now, the third pillar, strategic flexibility, is all about knowing when to apply strict rules and when to bend them. Different levels of difficulty require different approaches. On the easier questions, usually the first 10 or so in logical reasoning, a strict logical standard works just fine. You can apply your usual process, be detail-oriented, and eliminate obviously flawed choices. Don't overcomplicate these. They're designed to be solved cleanly. Around the middle of the section, though, you'll find questions that have a subtle twist. Maybe the wrong answer is more tempting than usual, but here, you still got to maintain a strong logical standard, but you still want to start paying extra attention to subtle differences in language, scope, and detail. Stay on guard for tricks without overthinking things. But on the hardest questions towards the end, that's where good enough as a standard becomes key. If you expect a perfect solution, you're going to be disappointed. Strategic flexibility means you allow yourself to entertain a stretchy but still defensible interpretation. Compare the answers relative to each other rather than looking for one that's unequivocally brilliant. So when you reach a question that's clearly tricky, give yourself permission to slow down. Remind yourself, this is not about perfection, it's about careful comparison. By mentally preparing to be flexible on the toughest questions, you reduce anxiety and make clearer choices. Now that we've covered all three pillars, the Socratic review method, adaptive thinking, and strategic flexibility, how do you make this part of your daily study routine? First, daily drilling using the Socratic review method. You could start off each study session by reviewing a few missed questions from your previous work. Don't just read the explanations. Engage in that mini Socratic dialogue with yourself or your coach or your study buddy. It might take as much as 10 to 15 minutes per question at first, but you'll speed up as you get better. Second, you want to take timed sections with adaptive thinking. Consciously remind yourself to spot patterns. If something feels off, articulate why. And if you're stuck between two choices, push yourself to consider the test maker's perspective. Third, take full practice tests with strategic flexibility. On full practice tests, you want to note the difficulty as the section goes on. Prepare to shift your standards later in the section. By the time you hit the toughest ones, remind yourself, perfection is not the goal. Choosing the relatively best answer is. And of course, each week, assess your progress. Are you getting stuck on the same types of questions? If so, revisit your Socratic review notes, look for patterns in your mistakes, and refine your approach even further. Now, you might be wondering, why does this actually work? It's because the LSAT is not testing your ability to memorize rules. It's testing your ability to think. By using the Socratic review method, you refine your reasoning skills at a granular level. By embracing adaptive thinking, you align yourself with the test maker's point of view. And by applying strategic flexibility, you free yourself from the impossible standard of logical perfection and focus on what the LSAT actually rewards, careful comparative judgment. Together, these three pillars build a feedback loop. The more you engage deeply with the questions you got wrong, the sharper you become at recognizing traps. The sharper you become, the more confidently you can handle tough questions. And the more confidently you handle tough questions, the higher you score. Now let's talk about results. I've seen my students apply this strategy and jump from the low 160s into the high 170s. A common story is someone who hovered around 165 for months, but once they start truly digging into the Socratic review method, questioning their own reasoning, they begin to see patterns in their misunderstandings. Within a few weeks, their accuracy on the toughest questions improves, and so does their overall score. Others report feeling less anxious because they trust the process. Instead of blindly guessing or hoping for the best, they rely on a tested framework. Over time, these changes add up to significant score jumps, sometimes 10, 15, or even 20 points above the initial plateau. Now that you have the blueprint, here's what I suggest. First, start small. Take one recent practice test where you struggled. Apply the Socratic review method to every missed question. This will feel slow at first, and that's totally normal. Quality over quantity matters most here. Second, track the patterns in your mistakes and also the insights that you're gaining. Note recurring traps, question types that trip you up, and specific logical patterns you missed. Third, incorporate adaptive and flexible mindsets. As you attempt new timed sections, remind yourself that the difficulty escalates as the section goes on. Adjust your expectations as you move through the section and allow yourself to choose the best available option, not some mythical perfect one. Finally, measure your progress over time. Every few weeks, do a timed section or a full exam to gauge your improvement. Don't just look at your overall score. Look at where you're making fewer mistakes and how you feel during the process. Ideally, you're feeling more confident and more calm. Now, breaking through the LSAT score ceiling isn't magic. It's about evolving your approach. The Socratic review method, adaptive thinking, and strategic flexibility form a system designed to push you beyond the standard advice. It's the strategy nobody tells you about because it requires you to break from the simplistic plug-and-play methods that stop working in the mid-160s. If you invest time in understanding your own thought process, by embracing the flexibility of the hardest questions, and by giving yourself permission to be flexible, you'll not only reach the 170 plus range, but you'll be able to do it consistently. Now, if you'd like my help engaging in this process on your journey to scoring a 170 plus, my team and I would be glad to help you out. You can check out the links below to book a call with me and my team. And in the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.